The Colors and Scale Configuration tab has many interesting and useful plotting features that are really worth exploring, including changing the plot line colors, scaling the plot line values before they're plotted, changing the width of the plot lines as well as those of the grid lines, and changing the background color of the plot area along with changing the text colors of the X and Y plot scales. Another feature is selecting which analog channels get plotted and which ones don't. So let's get started. Now from our last settings with the Axis tab, and let's go to the Axis tab, we notice that our grid scales have been adjusted to match what you're seeing now, which is a grid of 20 lines in the X direction and 20 lines in the Y direction, a Y scale of 0 to 600, an X time scale of 0 to 30 seconds, and no digital signals. Now before we go any further, let's turn on our digital plot. Macro has been generating both analog and digital signals right along, but we've elected to turn off the digital data up to now to basically avoid screen clutter. So to display the digital signals, go to the View menu at the top and click on Display Digital. Okay, there it is. This will bring up the 8 channels of digital data at the top of the screen. So let's start plotting again by clicking the Connect icon, the Plot icon, and the Plot Reset icon. Now notice that the digital plots go from least significant at the top to most significant at the bottom, and that each line hugs a horizontal grid line. And the values on the y-axis really have nothing to do with the digital data, so we can ignore them. All right, let's go back to the Colors and Scale tab. Now the first feature of this tab is changing the width of the grid lines, the digital plots, and also the analog plot lines, right here. Let's start with the major grid lines. Right now they're set to 1, so let's change them to 2. So click on the major grid drop down and select 2 and click Set. Okay, now the major grid lines are actually thicker. Now let's do the same thing with the digital data plots. Right now they're set at 2, so let's change them to 3 and see what happens. Clicking Set. All right, now we see our digital data lines as much thicker than they were before. Okay, finally let's change our analog plot lines from 2 to 3 as well. Okay, our analog plot lines are thicker as well. Now we can change the plot grid color from what it is now to another color. Right-click the little square to the left of the width drop-down, which brings up the color palette choices. There we go. Let's choose another color. Let's say, pinkish red, I guess. Click OK and click Set. Aha! Now the grid lines are a brand new color. Now we can do the same thing with the digital plot lines. Right-click the little square to the left of the width drop-down and bring up the color palette again. And let's choose, for example, green. Let's choose this green. Click OK, click Set. All right, now our digital plot lines are green. Not particularly attractive as far as I'm concerned, but they're green. And of course, you can always change them back to another color if you want. Now, how about changing the plot background color to white or something else, but except white? Once again, right-click on the back square. That's this one right here. To bring up the color palette, choose a color, then click OK, then click Set. So what will we choose? Let's choose yellow, okay? So yellow, OK, and Set. Whammo! Now our plot background is a brand new color. We can do the same things to the X and Y number scales. Right now they're black, but by changing on the square box right here, we can bring up the color palette, and let's choose some other color. For example, like choose this orange color. Click OK, then click Set. All right, now we've actually changed our scale color to something else. Now, before going on, let's change the colors and the widths back to their default values. You can do this by reloading the No Frills plotter, just by going back and changing all the colors and widths manually. We'll just reload the No Frills plot and drop the digital traces for now. Now that we've got our No Frills plot back again, let's experiment with the individual analog plot lines. You can see that there are 10 choices for the analog plots labeled channel 0 through channel 9. And right now all the boxes are checked, meaning that if all 10 analog plots were coming in, they'd be plotted using the color next to the checkbox. There's also a X or times value as well as a plus, so that we can mathematically scale the analog data before they are plotted. And we'll get to this shortly. But first, let's uncheck some of the boxes to see what happens. So let's start by unchecking channel 9, channel 8, channel 7, 6, 5, and 4. Well, nothing seems to be happening, but since we're not plotting these analog channels, nothing should. Now let's uncheck channel 3. Notice that the green channel 3 plot line stops at the point where it was unchecked, and only the other 3 lines continue to be plotted. Now let's uncheck channel 2 and channel 1. Now these plot lines disappear, and we're left only with channel 0. Hiding plot lines is a great way to reduce screen clutter and to concentrate on the plot or plots you're interested in at the moment, and this is how to do it. Now, another thing we can do with the analog plots is to apply a scaling factor to them. Let's start with channel 0 and change the multiply value from 1 to 2 to see what happens. Okay, come in here, change 1 to 2, click Enter. Now, channel 2, the black plot, is double the size it was before because we multiplied its value by 2 before it was plotted. Now we can do the reverse and make it smaller by changing the multiply value to 0.5. And let's do that. So we type in 0.5, hit Enter. And now channel 0 is half the amplitude of the original plot. Now, one important application of using the scaling multiplier is to scale things like 10-bit analog to digital converter data directly to a voltage value. Okay, let's bring the other 3 channels back by checking channel 1, channel 2, and channel 3 again. The other scaling feature is the plus function, where we can add a positive or negative bias to the incoming analog signal. Now, for example, let's change channel 1 from 0 to 150. So we do it in the second box here under plus. We'll type in 150, Enter. And as you can see, channel 1 is now plotting at a higher bias level. Now let's do the same for channel 3. For channel 3, let's say we'll change it to 300. As you can see, the sine waves oscillate around the new bias level, and they're separated from one another. Finally, if you don't like the plot colors that we've chosen for you, you can change these as well. Just right-click on the color box next to the check mark and bring up the color palette again and choose a new color. All right, we'll do that for, let's say, channel 0, which is black. Let's make channel 0 let's make him a yellow color. Click OK, then click Set. Now channel 0 is yellow. So these are the major points of what the Color and Scales tab can do, and as you can see, you have multiple choices for changing plot colors, analog scales, bias levels, and background colors. But once again, none of these settings are permanently saved unless we do a macro build and save this plot to a new file name. Right now, again, these settings will work as long as we don't get out of the no-frill spot that we're in right now. And we'll learn how to save all the settings later in the Learn series of videos.